And let me start with, what is your proposal to Washington for additional assistance?
I think that we're working in 3 areas. First of all, economic. I said without bread there is no peace. So that's why I think we need to work very hard on all these economic problems. We had the support of the United States, and we hope to have more support of the United States. Basically, what is going to be the loans for Colombia. We will start an IMF program. We hope at the end of next month we will sign this agreement with the IMF. We need the support in IDB, in the World Bank, and the support in some of what we have called the alternative development programs, so that we can invest in these areas, which we have drugs, and try to develop new products like palm oil or corn or reforestation. So I think that we need resources to invest in these areas. Infrastructure also I think is very important. A second area in which we're asking help, or more than help, I think is support. It's in all the eradication, fumigation, fighting drugs. I've said that here is a partnership between Colombia, the United States, and the world. It's not only a problem of Colombia or the United States, it's a world problem. So we need to work very hard on that. And third of all is support in the militaries. I think in any case we need support also for the militaries. I've said that I want to do the peace in peace and not the peace in war, and I think that's the most important thing.
When General McCaffrey was here, he was talking about a package that would be somewhere near 600 million. Are those the same ballpark numbers that you're talking about?
I don't think so. Even he talked like $1 billion.
But that's for the whole region. That's the whole region, yeah.
We haven't figured, or yet we're studying which is the proposal for how many years, because at least this is not one year help. I think that at least we need 3-4 years. So I think that by the end of this week or starting next week, we will have now this program to send to the states. What we want to do is, if you allow me, what we want to do is a bipartisan plan that we want to take to the United States. It's not only for the government. We need to have the support of the Congress, the support of the government, the support of the people of America in this project, because we need sometimes maybe we have to talk not only aid to eradicate and fumigate and control and fight drugs. We need aid also to invest in alternative development. We need support also in our commercial enhancement between Colombia and the United States, military support. So we want to take a plan, bipartisan plan, support by Democrats, Republicans, and that's what we have right now. If you see the letters of Speaker Hustler and Trent Lott, the same thing, the letters of Gephardt, Gerritsen, last week to President Clinton, all of them, Republicans and Democrats, are asking the government to support, and that's the purpose also of the government, Clinton's government, to support Colombia in this fight.
There has been, and it is no secret that there has been opposition in Washington, yes, to the military part of the plan. How do you see those splits in Washington? Do you have to navigate?
Yes, and I think that, but I think at the same time that things have changed. I think that since I started my government, even before I started my government in August of last year, I was very clear that we need to work very hard with the military, even inside the militaries, in respecting the human rights. I think that's the most, or the people criticize what was happening in the armed forces of Colombia regarding human rights. We've been working very hard. That's my order, and I think that they have done a very, very good job. If you see the figures of last year's to the figures of this year, you have a complete change in the military. And we need that support, because we know that we've been in a fight for 40 years. We need to fight the insurgency, we need to fight the guerrilla, but we hope at the same time very soon to start this peace process, these negotiations between the FARC, that is the largest group in Colombia, and the ELN. And I think that that's what's going to happen very soon for the good of this country.
How does the U.S. have greater involvement with counter-narcotics but not get involved in the Colombian Civil War?
I think they're two completely different things. That's why we're asking, please, lend us or give us the possibility to buy helicopters, arms that we need to fight insurgency. And I think this has been happening for many years. Regarding the war on drugs, they have been supporting the police. Now they are supporting the army, and they need to support the army. Why? Because you know that sometimes the police, for example, is in a fumigation area, the guerrilla is attacking the police. We need to send the army, so that's why we're creating what we call the anti-narcotics battalion, that it's personal, specialized in fighting drugs, in helping the police in this fight against the drug. And that's why we need to release, you may say, some of the men of the army so that they could be support for the police in the fight against drugs.
But the Army's position is to take back land that the guerrillas control. What's the difference between a civil war and a fight against drugs? Is there any difference?
No, I think that now you could see that, not in the whole country, but in a good part of the country, the presence of guerrillas in the same land in which illicit crops are grown. And that's why I think also the Army is very committed in the fight against drugs, because at the same time they're fighting the guerrillas, they're fighting the drugs. And that's why we need to create this alliance between police and army, because sometimes you go after the guerrillas and you know that you arrive in areas in which they're cultivating illicit crops. But in some areas of Colombia, different areas of the country, still you have presence of insurgency, of guerrilla, in which you don't have presence of drugs. So that's why we need to fight the insurgency, the guerrilla activity in other parts of Colombia, and give support with the army to the police in their fight against drugs.
The 2 battalions that will be the extra ones, I know we're training 1 battalion now, we're said to be training 2 more. Will those battalions be only used for counter-narcotics or also for
counter-narcotics, supporting the police.
Only that?
That's why we call them anti-narcotics, releasing the rest of the army to fight insurgency.
Okay. Are you convinced that if you can subdue the guerrillas, that you will have better success with the drug war? That is definitely?
Oh, yes. That's why I've said to the United States, and if you see the agenda that we signed with the FARC, the first point in the agenda is eradication of illicit crops. The first point in the agenda that we signed between the guerrilla and the government is eradication of illicit crops. Why? Because they want to occupy a political space in this country. They want to do politics. So the first thing they have to show the world is that they are not a narco-guerrilla. And that's why they are committed to fight drugs. And that's why it's the first point in the agenda between the guerrilla and the government.
But yet you're training the army to go and smash them in this very...
Oh yes, no. That's the first point of negotiation in the agenda. We hope to sign this negotiation process with the guerrilla. But even that, in some areas, we have decided, when we start this negotiation process, to create pilot projects in eradication illicit crops in some of the areas of this country. Between Colombia, the government of Colombia, the guerrilla, the insurgency, and the international aid. We're going to show the world, and they want to show the world, that they are committed in eradicating illicit crops.
Are you convinced that eradication is the key to stopping both coca and poppy production?
Oh yes, oh, definitely. But you need to have in the equation, you need to take to think in 3 different things. Consumers, okay. Producers, okay. But for example, chemicals, precursors. If you don't have ether, if you don't have acetone, you don't have coca. If you don't have coca leaves, you don't have coca, okay, the same way. So that's why I think that we need to work, producers, consumers, and third states that are involved in this process, like in the case of Europe, that they're sending a lot of chemicals. With these chemicals, we produce the drug that we export to the United States and to Europe and to Asia. So that's why I've been talking of a partnership. We cannot talk, I think, of supply and demand more, because in the last year we were talking, okay, supply, demand. I think that we have to talk from right thing and wrong thing. The wrong thing is to produce or to consume drugs. So that's why we need to put all our efforts in the eradication. And that's why I also have said that the worst enemy of the peace process is narcotics. Because they know if we achieve peace, we are going to eradicate drugs.
But you have had peasant protests about eradication. You have environmental problems with eradication. Why is that still the number one?
Why? Because peasants, a way of living is cultivating coca or poppy. If we don't give them an alternative product for their crops, they will stay in that illicit crop. So that's why we need to create, and that's why we need money, a lot of money, to really create alternative products in these areas, as I said before, or palm oil, or corn, or cattling, or even reforestation. So that's why people are saying we need a way of living. So what we're trying to say to them is, okay, we are going to work together, the peasants, the government, and create all these new areas in which we will have new products. That's why we have the products of them, because they want a way of living. And at the same time, I think that we know that we have an economic problem of employment, and that's why we're working very hard in creating new conditions for the reactivation of the economy in this country, to create new jobs. And in that sense, the peasants, and even some of the people that left the cities to go to these areas in which we have cocaine or poppy fields, they will be back in the cities to have a new employment and work in the cities.
It has been said that the Colombian police department is one of the best, if not the best, in the area. And I have heard people in Washington say that if you unbalance the aid, if you give too much money to the military, you undermine the police.
No, I don't think so. They're two completely different things. And in the war against drugs, but we need at the same time to have the way of creating this alliance, this support of the army is fundamental for the police. And you've seen it in the last months, not only in the fight against drugs, also in defending their own police cartels in some of the districts of this country. We need that the army and police works together. And that's why we're working together. And I've said, and I think that for the first time in Colombia, for the first time in this country, the whole country is united in the war against drugs. The president, the cabinet, the government, the police, the army, the judges, the attorney, all of us will create all these new alliances to fight drugs. And that's why we think that with the support of the US, of Europe, of the world, we could fight and eradicate these illicit crops in my country.
The focus now in Washington is on Army training,
yes.
Colombian Army training, and it raises questions about an Army that doesn't have a spotless record. People say that it could take a generation to reform this Army.
No, I don't think so. As I've said, you see the figures. If you see the figures of the last year, things have changed completely. And now the Army, they have the conscience of working the human rights. You're going to see, for example, the human rights track. That's creating the conscience in our Army that we need to defend and protect human rights. And they're working very hard on that. And as I said before, the figures, I think this year there are accused 2 or 3 only members of the Army of violation of human rights. Figures change completely. And I think that's one of the purpose in the reforms of the Army. Secondly, since I started my government, I created a special commission, military, government, civilians, to work in the reforms of the Army in Colombia. And we hope that by the end of this year, or starting next year, we could send new legislation to the Congress to reform our Army in my country.
There has been a lot of U.S. money spent here on the war on drugs up till now. Why hasn't that worked?
That's a good question for the United States. Why you're still consuming such amounts of drugs in your country? Why even that you spend 20, 30, or 50 more amount of money in the United States, why still consuming is so high? That's a good question. What's happening in Europe? Why people are starting to consume in Europe? So I think that's why we need this new alliance. I said that this is a partnership. We cannot say, as I said before, this is a problem of supply and demand. It's right or wrong. It's wrong to produce, yes, but it's wrong to consume. So that's why we need to unite all of us in this fight against the world. I said that's the worst thing that could happen to the world is drugs. It's the largest business in the world, $500 billion. So we need a lot of money. but at the same time, we need not only work on the repression, on the policing aspect, education. I think it's very important.
You know, I know, and that the reason this drug business survives is because we don't stop taking them. I absolutely agree.
It's sport.
And it's better to spend $600 million back in the States to get people
but
to
at
stop.
the same time, you have to see something that sometimes you don't realize. We are eradicating 60, 70, 80,000 hectares a year of cocaine. Why don't we think what happened if we didn't eradicate those hectares? This year, until September, I think that we are near 9,000 hectares of poppy fields that we have to destroy and eradicate, and near 50,000 hectares this year of cocaine. So we've worked, and I think the money has been invested. But sometimes I think you need more commitment, more money, not only for fumigation but eradication, but at the same time to create alternative crop for the peasants in this country.
But the question is, what's happened that you have to expand so much? Is it because of the guerrillas? Is it?
No, I think my own way of thinking, and that's why I'm putting a lot in alternative development, is that we need to create really new alternative crops for the peasants. The peasants in Colombia, they don't want to be in illegality. They don't want to be outside of the law. They want a crop in which they could live for 1 year, not only 1 month. Sometimes you go and you see, okay, cooking could be 1 or twice a year. They have some money twice, 1 month or 2 months, but what's going to happen the rest of the year? So for example, that's why I've been working very hard in creating alternative production such as palm oil. With some studies that we have, you could see that a peasant with 5 hectares of palm oil could earn between $60 to $800 a month. So that's something that we need to create, but for that we need money. Also we need to invest in infrastructure. And I think that if you give these alternatives to our peasants, they will be creating these new jobs, new alternatives, and get out of drugs and get out of being outside of the law.
On the military side of this equation, what is the most important thing that the U.S. will do? Is it intelligence? Is it training?
First of all, we need, for example, helicopters. We need some arms, intelligence, training. Even that you know, we've been in this West for 40 years. So I think that you have to see Colombia. Colombia is very difficult. It's not sometimes people think that it's going in and out. There's 3 chains mountains, jungle. So it's difficult to fight. Yeah. And that's why I think that for the first time, we have an alternative that it's peace. And that's why we're working very hard on this peace process. And we hope that we will be engaged in the negotiations in the next year, and we hope that we will sign a peace process very soon with the FARC and with the ELN.
And do you think that the guerrillas will understand that what the U.S. is doing is only counter-narcotics and not counter-insurgency?
Well, that's confidence, and that's why I think that this process has been going through, because the confidence of the FARC in Pastrana, the confidence of Pastrana in the leaders of the FARC. We are working in this negotiation process, and we hope, as I said before, the first thing I said to the FARC is, why don't we do peace in peace? Because people don't understand what's happening in the country. That you're sitting, but at the same time, those are the example, unfortunately, of the world. If you see what happened yesterday, okay, Arafat and Barak sit down to sit, sign an agreement, bah, car bombs, bombs everywhere. But people understanding that is very, very difficult. And that's my proposal to the FARC is, why don't we do peace in peace? Why don't we try to do peace in peace instead of doing peace in war? And we hope to achieve this peace in peace very soon in Colombia.
You all are shuffling. Are we okay for time?
Yes?
Okay.
Okay.
Do you think that U.S. citizens will understand that line between anti-narcotics, or will they see U.S. military involvement here in a way that will remind them of Central America of the 70s and 80s?
So, and maybe I'll ask, I'll give you an answer of one of the questions that you asked me before. You have to see also that the guerrilla is involved in these areas in which drugs are growing. So you could see also this link between drugs and guerrillas. I'm not saying that this is a narco-guerrilla, and I've been very clear on that. The U.S. has been very clear on that. But the guerrilla lives of taking care of the plantations, taxes, So that's why I think the people in the United States and in the world, they should understand that there's a big link between them. Even that this is not a narco-guerrilla they're living, they have a lot of money at this moment to buy arms and for their fight, for the insurgency. So that's why I think for the first time I'm saying, if we eradicate drugs, and that's why I've said before, the worst enemy of the peace process, it's drugs. And that's why we need to get involved in this peace process. And with the peace process, as I said also before, putting in the agenda, point number 1, eradication of illicit crops, we will see for the first time, or I think that we are looking for the first time, an alternative of what has happened in the last years, that it's the guerrilla, it's committed to eradicate drugs. And this is the first time in the history of the guerrilla and the insurgents in Colombia that they're willing to talk or work on eradication. Even, as you remember, they had a meeting between the U.S. Department of State and the guerrilla. Why? Because the guerrilla want to say directly to the U.S. government, we are willing and committed, and we are committed to eradicate drugs. And that's why it was very important, this first meeting with the FARC and the State Department. Because directly, in their own voice, they said to the U.S., we want, at least to start this process of eradication of illicit crops in Colombia.
Mr. President, I thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Yes?
So,
What do you have to think is that?
narco-traffickers would certainly buy protection, that you'd have a different group of people who would be standing at the airstrips, who would be, standing at the plantations, that the traffickers, for them, the guerrillas are just a convenience.
I don't think so. Oh yes, it's convenience.
Yes.
But I think it's...
In Colombia, as we become advisors to your military.
Never. While I am president of the United States, while I am president of Colombia, you will never see U.S. troops or foreign troops in this country. Some people have said that Colombia is a regional threat. That's not true. We have our army that has complete control over borders. But while I am president of Colombia, they will never be foreign troops in this country.
Will U.S. troops be fighting Colombia's civil war?
Never. You know, you need a constitutional approval to have foreign troops in this country. But even that, if I'm president of Colombia, or while I am president of Colombia, they will never be foreign troops or U.S. troops fighting guerrilla or other type of fight in this country.